What's up, guys? It's your pal on wheels, CT Barry, coming at you with this week's episode of WrestleTalk. This would be like from last Monday onward, like until Saturday. So that's like what, portion of wrestling we're going to be talking about in this video. And I'm going to get into something, and I'm going to warn you, I'm about ready to go on a rant, so just be prepared. So, we're going to start by talking about AEW, and something I'm going to bring up first is the backlash that Taya Valkyrie has been receiving since her match with Britt Baker this past Wednesday on Dynamite. So, it was posted on Twitter by Taya Valkyrie herself that she has been getting called fat and a bunch of other not nice things by wrestling fans, and I'm putting that in quotation for a reason, and let me tell you why. Guys, if you're doing this type of shit to the wrestlers, you aren't no wrestling fan. You're a piss poor excuse for one. I'm just going to be brutally blunt honest. Because here's the thing. When you go and body shame someone, you're not attacking Taya Valkyrie the wrestler. You're attacking Taya Valkyrie the human. I believe her real name is Kiera Foster, and you're attacking the human. You know, it's one thing to say that you're not impressed by talent. Trust me. I've said it numerous times on this channel that there are certain talent in the wrestling business that does not impress me. But one thing you will never hear me do is body shame someone. Guys, that is disgusting on all levels. You know, it's like, and I've made promos calling out wrestlers at TWA, but you will never hear me bash the human beings behind those characters. I'm talking about the characters, not the human beings. There's people that need to know the difference. Because trust me, when I go to indie shows, there's plenty of people who get mad because a heel wrestler does something, and they're going to stand outside the New Haven Community Building and fight the wrestler after the show. It's like, guys, it's a fucking show. This is not reality. If you are going to attack the human being behind the wrestler that plays the wrestler, then you shouldn't be watching this sport. Period. God. It is disgusting what people do behind the keyboard, and they're too chicken shit to say it to somebody's face. Yeah, people are probably going to be pissed at this video, but I really don't care. Because that is something that just irks the shit out of me as a wrestling fan. You do not attack the human being that plays a wrestler. And you know what? You know, Tyra's human just like us. She's an athlete. Every athlete's going to have an off night once in a while. Tom Brady's had plenty of off nights in his career. Aaron Rodgers has. I mean, some of the best athletes on the planet have had bad outings. So, Tyra, I speak on behalf of the smart wrestling fans that I am so sorry that you had to endure that hate. And every time I see it, I'm going to get on here and call it out. Because that's not a wrestling fan I'm striving to be. Because let me tell you something. I go to independent shows all the time. I at least go to 3 a month. You know, and I'm trying to break into the business myself to help out with those local shows that are around my area. Here's the thing. Is every match at that independent level a 5-star match? No. Not even close. But am I going to sit here and bash the wrestlers that are busting their asses to entertain us fans? No. I mean, come on, people. It's one thing to be critical about a show. Alright, that's what I do here on WrestleTalk. As I criticize when I feel shows need to be criticized. But I'm not going to sit here and criticize the human beings that bust their asses to put on these shows. I'm not going to do that. It's like, I've talked plenty of times that, you know, Jon Moxley bleeds too much in one-on-one matches. But are you going to hear me bash Jonathan Good, the man? No. I'm just saying that bleeding doesn't need to go on in every stinking match that goes on. But I love Jon Moxley. I've followed him since his Shield days. I mean, you're never going to hear me bash the human beings behind the wrestlers. But I think I've said enough about that. I'm sure my neighbors can hear me and they're like, what the hell is he ranting on about? But, guys, do not sit behind your keyboards and bash the wrestlers. Because you may think that they don't care, but they do. Why do you think mental health sucks in a lot of people? Why do you think people commit suicide? Because they feel like they're not good enough and they have to live up to all these standards brought on by social media, and it's absolute bullshit. I'm just going to say the truth. But I'm done ranting about that. I'm going to move on. But let's get on, and we're going to talk about AR Fox joining the Mogul Embassy. I mentioned last week on WrestleTalk that, you know, I'd like to see AR Fox join a faction with Action Andrade and Darius and Dante Martin when he comes back from injury. But now, you know, on Wednesday's episode of Dynamite, we saw a AEW International title match between AR Fox and Orange Cassidy. And after the match, it was a show of respect. But after Orange Cassidy put the aviators on AR Fox behind his back took him off, ripped him in half, and then clubbed Orange Cassidy in the back of the head, to Darby Allin's dismay, because, you know, when the show went on air, they did this tribute video to AR Fox and talk about like how he came up in the business and all that. And as AR Fox was going to the back, Darby Allin came out and just ripped into him for laying out Orange Cassidy like that. And then later on in the show, Darby Allin had a match with Swerve Strickland, and as Darby Allin was about ready to get counted out and he was getting back in the ring before the 10 count, a guy in a hood came and laid him out, and then Swerve Strickland was able to hit his finishing maneuver to win the match. And then as the masked assailant took the hood off, it was revealed to be AR Fox, and he was given a Mogul Embassy t-shirt by Prince Nana. So I guess that means AR Fox is a heel now, and he's going to join the Mogul Embassy. So I'm interested to see where this goes. But speaking of another faction, it seems to be there's one that's dissolving and another one that's going to form in its ashes. And I'm talking about, Chris Jericho, potentially joining the Don Callis family. Because over the past few weeks on Dynamite, Don Callis has made some compelling offers to Chris Jericho to join the Don Callis family, and even gave him a picture of Don Callis and Chris Jericho along with Doc Brown from their WCW days. And so it looks like, and the Chris Jericho Appreciation Society is getting upset because, they feel like Chris Jericho doesn't appreciate him. They feel like he's abandoning him. And they all came into his locker room and ripped into him, and they all left. And then this week on Dynamite, we are going to see Chris Jericho and Katasha versus members of the JAS, Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia. So I'm really interested in the story and seeing how this goes. And to stick with the subject of tag teams, let's talk about my new favorite tag team. I still need to get their t-shirt. Better Than You, baby. I'm talking about my two favorite wrestlers in AEW right now, MJF and Adam Cole. And on Collision, a couple days ago, they lost their match against FTR, and they failed to capture the AEW World Title, or World Tag Team titles, excuse me. And, MJF was very upset with himself because he moved Adam Cole out of the way so he didn't get hit with the shatter machine, and then FTR tried to hit it on MJF to no avail, but Cash Wheeler was able to roll him up for the victory, and MJF was in the corner visibly upset, saying that he blew the match. And Adam Cole and FTR shook hands, and then Adam Cole went to comfort MJF, and he handed him the world title, and then Adam Cole went into the other corner, and it looked like MJF was going to hit Adam Cole in the back with the AEW World Title, and and then Adam Cole knew, and he was like, do it, just get it over with. And then MJF threw the title out of the ring, and then Adam Cole and MJF proceeded to hug it out. So I've been reading some stuff saying that, that instead of MJF turning on Cole, because it'd be predictable, that Adam Cole would turn heel and turn on MJF, and MJF would remain a babyface. Which is interesting to me, because someone was saying in a comment section, I believe it was on the Pro Wrestling Lounge, that, Roderick Strong has been, telling Adam Cole not to trust MJF, and, and Adam Cole and Roderick Strong go back to their Ring of Honor days, that go back to their Undisputed Era days in NXT. So, that would be really interesting, and I think it would give MJF a fresh set of competition for him to be a babyface. To go against some heels. So, which, personally, I hope they stay together, because I think it's one of the most over things in wrestling right now. So we shall see how this plays out. on AEW in the coming weeks. But switching gears from tag team wrestling, let's talk about the Andrade and Buddy Matthews ladder match that Andrade's mask was on the line, and it was a pretty good match. It seemed like Buddy Matthews dislocated his shoulder, and Dr. Sampson, the ringside physician for AEW, had to pop it back into place. But a spot that, I want to bring up was when Andrade hit a sunset flip powerbomb onto a ladder to Buddy Matthews. And a lot of fans were complaining because that was the same spot that in the Reach for the Sky ladder match in memory of Jay Briscoe for the ROH tag titles that Dante Martin tried to do it. I can't remember if it was Pita El Ceramero or Mike Bennett that he did the same spot and it ended up breaking his leg. But here's the thing. Injuries can happen. We remember, when we would buy the WWE home videos back in the day. And one of the first things was like, and it was Chris Jericho. No, it was Rey Mysterio that would always say injuries can happen at any time. And that's the truth. But Andrade has done this Lucha Libre style wrestling for years because that's where it started, was in his home country in Mexico. And, Buddy Matthews competed on 205 Live back in when he was in the WWE, and he was the Cruiserweight champion. So, these guys have experience doing those spots, and, Dante, he doesn't have a lot of experience yet, but, think about Seth Rollins. He tried to do that same move to Kane off the top rope, and he said he'd done it a million times, but that one time, his knee buckled and he blew his knee out. So, injuries can happen. And that's wrestling. These guys, take risk and endure unimaginable pain. That's also a quote from the Don't Try This at Home WWE thing that they did back in the day. And, and that's what happens. And I think it was a good spot by two wrestlers that were very experienced, and, and fortunately this time no injuries happened. But all around, I thought it was a really good match and really entertaining. And, switching gears, let's talk about CM Punk. Because we remember, he was the AEW World Champion. He beat Jon Moxley for the belt, but he was injured, and he also got into that scuffle with the Elite backstage that, he was out for a number of months because of that and injury, and he has been carrying this red bag around on Collision and saying that nobody's man enough to beat him for it, and it was revealed that it was the AEW World title that he won when he beat Jon Moxley, because it still had his blood on it and everything, and, he trademarked it with his straight edge X symbol, and there's actually going to be a title match for it this coming Saturday on Collision, with him and the man who beat him in the Owen Hart finals, Ricky Starks, as well as that tag team match from a couple of weeks ago now. And the special guest referee will be WWE Hall of Famer and wrestling legend Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who apparently reffed some CM Punk matches back in his Ring of Honor days, and called him right down the middle. So, I think personally, and I know people are going to say, well, they're just copying WWE at this point. But I think Dynamite needs to be one roster, and Collision needs to be another one. Because you have all this talent that's signed, and WWE has the same issue, that's not being utilized because they can't fit them all in. And another problem with the AEW is, and I didn't put this in my notes, but it came to my brain, so I'm going to say it. AEW or Warner Media only allows them to have one women's match. Because if you watch ROH on Honor Club, they have all kinds of matches on there. And it's because, they're their own streaming service. Like, they don't have to answer to some big cable corporation. So, I hope one day that AEW gets a streaming service like, Peacock or whatever, that we can watch all their pay-per-views and all their weekly shows on, because let me tell you what, if the day comes Raw and SmackDown start airing on Peacock, in a timely fashion, and AEW gets their own thing, adios sling. I won't be paying $40-some a month for that anymore. But switching gears from AEW, let's talk about Impact, and we'll go right into the world title picture, because at Slammiversary, Josh Alexander came back. Alex Shelley is the world champion. Leo Rush is the X Division champion, which means he can cash in on Option C, which means he'll relinquish the X Division championship in exchange for a world title match. And then we also have Kushida, who won Ultimate X at Slammiversary. So he is now the number one contender for the X Division title, which means he could win the X Division title from Leo Rush and then go on to Option C. So, this world title picture is really interesting because, Josh Alexander never lost the belt. He had to relinquish it due to injury. Leo Rush all he has to do is say Option C. So, and I said, I love Alex Shelley. I've always been a Machine Guns fan. But, Josh Alexander has put Impact on his back for the last few years now. And of course, I think Shelley is a great champion. But, Josh Alexander, I think the way he held that title, he put that title, on the map. In my opinion, he reminds me a lot of AJ Styles as champion, Bobby Roode as champion. Two guys that really elevated the Impact World title. So, I think it'd be good to see Josh Alexander as champion. And something else that's coming to my brain, and this ties into one of my next topics, is of Eric Young's return to Impact Wrestling. Nick Aldis mentioned to him when Eric Young was doing an interview with Gia Miller that, he's tired of all these internet indie darlings coming in and taking over the house that they built. So, what about this? You have Nick Aldis and Eric Young, right? Here's a good story for you. Josh Alexander beats Alex Shelley, right? Him and Chris Sabin both turn heel, because Chris Sabin was a really good heel back in 2012, 2013, when he had that, world title run, and then he won the X Division title, and he was being a douchebag to Velvet Sky. So I think that would work because then you have 4 TNA originals going up against, the self-professed, as Nick Aldis said, the indie darlings. But that's if Nick Aldis stays and doesn't go to WWE, which, let's get back to Eric Young. That's why he came back, because when Endeavor took, bought the majority of WWE, he didn't want to work with Vince McMahon. So it's not clear if he was going to be a wrestler or if he was going to be a producer. We don't know. All I heard is he was signed to WWE for a while, and that's why, Diener, quote-unquote, killed him, was to write Eric Young off of Impact Wrestling. But now, as Tom Hanneman said on Impact, Eric Young has risen from the dead. So we shall see where a lot of this goes. And let's talk about, Johnny Swinger and Ziggy Dice. Again, I'm going to say this. I'm not bashing the human being behind the character. I have just never been impressed with Johnny Swinger. I don't like his character. It annoys me. And I don't know. But they had a match, because Johnny Swinger was on this road to 50 wins to get an Impact World title match. So he, couldn't get to 50 because he would always try to cheat, and then they would catch him, and then they're like, no, this isn't going to count. So when Scott D'Amore returned as president, he's like, you know what? You get one win, I'll give you a world title match. And your opponent is going to be Ziggy Dice. So then they're standing there like, oh yeah, Ziggy Dice is like, no problem, I'll just lay down for you, yada, yada, yada. Well, Scott D'Amore heard that, turned right around and said, hey, you two are going to fight each other, but whichever one of you loses has to leave Impact. So, they had a match, and then, it was, I'd say probably a 10-minute match. If that. And what happened was, Johnny Swinger, you thought he was going to put Ziggy over because he had him getting in that little wrestling cart. You remember, back in the 80s when the wrestlers would ride to that ring in that little ring cart thing? Well, and Johnny started pushing him, and then Johnny clotheslined him, and then threw him back in the ring and pinned him. But, as the ref was counting to 3, Johnny Swinger put his feet on the ropes to, and when the ref wasn't looking, to make sure he got the 3 count over Ziggy. So Ziggy is now gone from Impact Wrestling. So we will have to see what is next for Ziggy Dice. And now, as I said, the world title picture is interesting. Now insert Johnny Swinger into the mix. So Impact should be pretty interesting. And, so switching gears, at Slammiversary, we saw Trinity defeat Deonna Purrazzo by submission to win the Knockouts title. And on Impact, Deonna Purrazzo came out and said, I'm invoking my rematch at Emergence, which is, I believe it's the next Impact Plus special at the end of August. So we are going to get Trinity versus Deonna Purrazzo too. And from what I heard, I thought Trinity's deal was only through the summer, so I don't know if she'll be dropping the title back to Deonna or what's going to happen. We'll just have to wait and see, as I say a lot on Wrestling Talk. But switching gears to the WWE, we have a lot to talk about with the WWE. And the first thing we are going to talk about is Ricochet versus Logan Paul. Now, this is a match I'm very excited for. The high-flying wrestling lover in me is like a kid in a candy store for this one, because I'm ready to, see these two go at it, because, they did that double clothesline spot in the Royal Rumble. They did that Spanish Fly table spot at Money in the Bank. And on Raw, we saw Logan Paul come from behind and club Ricochet, and as Logan Paul was like dancing around and taking selfies, Ricochet jumped up and super kicked him and then hit a standing shooting star press on him. So I think this has a potential to be match of the night at SummerSlam, because Logan Paul has really taken this wrestling thing by storm, and with a widely veteran like Ricochet, who has made his name all over the world, this is going to be a very, very interesting match. And another interesting match coming up at SummerSlam, well, actually a fight, is Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler. Now, from what I've been reading online, Ronda Rousey wants an out with WWE. Like, she's done. So part of her thing was, to help put Shayna Baszler over. And, both women have history in the Octagon. So apparently at SummerSlam, they're going to have a fight. I'm sure we'll find out what that actually means tonight on Raw. And, see, because I'm really looking forward to this, especially if it's MMA with two fighters that have MMA history. Especially now that this just dawned on me that Endeavor owns 51% of WWE, which is also the parent company to the UFC. So this will be very, very interesting. And another match that I'm going to talk about coming up at SummerSlam is Drew McIntyre versus Gunther. Now, I think this will be a good match, but I really don't know who would benefit more from the win. Because, Gunther's doing really well as Intercontinental Champion right now. I mean, they could elevate him into the world title picture should he drop the title to Drew McIntyre at SummerSlam. But Drew doesn't really need the win either. So maybe they could have Gunther win and then have Drew get all mad and stuff and then turn heel. So I don't know what they'll do there. And speaking of not knowing what they're doing, is what's going on with LA Knight? I mean, the dude's one of the hottest stars in the WWE right now. You had the opportunity to have him win Money in the Bank. Then you had the opportunity to have him win the United States tournament to face Theory for the belt, and he ain't done it. I mean, I get it, patience is a virtue, but come on, guys. That's one of your hottest stars in the WWE right now. You gotta pull the trigger. I mean, yes, I know the dude's 40 years old, but he wrestles a safe style. Like, he's good for a while. Like, come on, man. Give him a chance. He was a beast in Impact Wrestling. He was a beast in NWA. The Billy Corgan NWA. So, I mean, come on, guys. Chop, chop. Let's push him. And, sticking with that United States title picture, Santos Escobar, one of the winners of the match, and then he would go on to face Rey Mysterio, who now apparently is injured, and it was not a storyline because Santos did a dive through the rope and Rey hit his head on the floor like did Whiplash. So, during the commercial break, the physician was checking him out and he couldn't continue. So now this Friday on SmackDown, the SmackDown for SummerSlam, Santos is going to go one-on-one with Austin Theory for the United States title. But the reason why I'm bringing up Santos Escobar in this week's edition of WrestleTalk is because I seen on Facebook something that he did a fan was asking him a question, and he got a little overwhelmed, and the fan got upset. So Santos picked him up and, and sat him on the ring, and Charlotte and Cody Rhodes were there as well, and Santos proceeded to sit there and talk to him. So I thought that was a very, very classy move by Santos Escobar. So good job, Santos Escobar. Bless you, brother. And then the Bayley and Shotzi feud's interesting because we saw on SmackDown a couple weeks ago that Bayley and Io cut Shotzi's hair after they attacked her backstage, and apparently Shotzi shaved some of her head and has been leaving marks of her hair in Bayley's locker and trying to intimidate her. So this could be the push that Shotzi really needs. But I guess the real reason behind shaving her hair was in support of her sister who has cancer, which I think is a very, very classy move. I mean, I lost one of my childhood best friends due to cancer, and, I know what, she went through and everything, and I just think it's awesome that Shotzi's supporting her sister through this difficult time, and her sister and the rest of the family are in my thoughts and prayers, and, and I think all of us wrestling fans need to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. So God bless Shotzi for doing this for her sister, and, her sister has my well wishes, and I pray that she beats this nasty disease. So last night we had NXT Backlash. So we're going to go through all the matches I'm going to talk about and give you my thoughts on it. Alright, so first match we had Gallus versus the D'Angelo family for the NXT tag titles. And, the story was that D'Angelo got snitched and got locked up. Well, then a couple weeks later, Stax captures Joe Coffey and puts him in the back of a car. Well, Stax did a deal with Coffey saying if you win, D'Angelo's going to be locked up, until his trial. But if I win, then D'Angelo's free, and we get a tag team title match against Gallus. So, it was thought that Stax was going to turn on D'Angelo, because D'Angelo acted really upset, like, how could you do this to me, Stax, after everything I've done for you? And then, come match time on NXT, when it was Stax versus Joe Coffey, we had the match, and when Stax didn't lay down, he goes, you thought I set up the Dawn, but I didn't. See, it ended up happening that Stax and Dawn planned this whole thing to make it look like Stax was the one that ratted him out, but in reality it was Joe Coffey. So they had a match, and the D'Angelo family was finally able to capture the NXT Tag Team title. So that made me very, very happy, because I've been really loving this whole D'Angelo family stuff, because it's kind of like Godfather, Mafia, the games. I'm a big fan of the Mafia games, so I really like this gimmick. And switching gears, we will talk about Gable Stevenson and Baron Corbin. I'm almost 40 minutes in, so I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quickly. And, Gable Stevenson finally made his long-awaited in-ring debut against Baron Corbin. And it wasn't a bad match. I mean, Gable looked good, but the end of the match was a double countout, and then they ended up brawling, and both men ended up attacking security. And then Gable ended up hitting a belly-to-belly, overhead belly-to-belly onto Corbin, and Corbin hit the barricade. Or no, he went through the barricade, excuse me. But I guess a lot of the crowd was not behind Gable Stevenson, so I think it'd be pretty interesting to turn Gable heel because, he's an NCAA champion. He's an Olympic gold medalist. So you could turn him heel and have like that I'm better than you all gimmick like what they did with Kurt Angle. And I think that would really help get him over. So, and then we have the North American title match between Dom Mysterio, Wesley, and Mustafa Ali. I thought it was a really good match. I honestly didn't think Dom was going to win, because, Rhea Ripley hit the Riptide on Wesley through the table. And then they threw him in the ring, and then she handed Dom the North American title, and then the ref took it away, and then she handed him the women's world title, and he hit Wesley with that, and Wesley kicked out. And then, then Mustafa Ali, and then, Dom tried to go to the top rope, and then Mustafa Ali stopped him, and then Mustafa Ali hit the 450, and, Wes kicked out, and then Dom was able to, hit the, or no, I think it was Mustafa that, Rhea pulled him out of the ring, and then Dom hit the frog splash to win, so we'll have to see where this North American title picture goes. But let's talk about Roxanne Perez and Blair Davenport in this Weapons Wild match. It was in Roxanne Perez's home state of Texas, and her mother and her younger sister were in the crowd, and Blair, and Roxanne was like taking pictures with the fans, and then Blair Davenport came out of the crowd and attacked Roxanne, and they went back and forth at this brutal match, and Roxanne was able to hit pop rocks onto some chairs onto Blair Davenport for the win. And then we had Tiffany Stratton and Thea Hale for the women's title, which I thought was a really good match too. And, Tiffany was able to use the ropes to be able to pull herself out of, Thea Hale's Kimura lock, and then she ended up hitting, she ended up hitting the, Thea Hale back first into the steps, and then hitting the prettiest moonsault ever to Thea Hale, and then was able to cinch it a deep Boston Crab, and then eventually Andre Chase threw in the towel for, to surrender for Thea Hale. And so it'll be interesting to see where Chase U goes from here, because Duke Hudson looked really unhappy about that. And then it was main event time, and we had Ilya Dragunov versus Carmelo Hayes for the NXT title, and Ilya was just destroying Carmelo Hayes, and then Carmelo Hayes got some offense, and then Trick Williams grabbed the NXT title, and you thought we were us, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna blast Bella with that, but it ended up being motivation, and then Trick Williams took a bullet for Carmelo when Ilya hit the Torpedo Moscow was trying to hit Carmelo Hayes, but he ended up hitting Trick Williams, and I think he ended up bouncing his head off the NXT title, because then Carmelo rolled him in the ring and then hit nothing but net for the win. And there was also a couple other close finishes that Ilya was trying to go coast to coast, and then Mello caught him out of midair with his 46-ish, I think is what he calls it, code breaker type move. And then Azealia was trying to go for a suplex. Carmelo reversed it in midair and hit a cutter. So, absolutely awesome match. 5-star in my opinion. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me for this episode of WrestleTalk. Hopefully you enjoyed. I will see you in the next video, and take care.